often you come into HR and it's so fast moving. Every day is different. There's a lot of real time situations, and the HR teams are getting stuck in what do we do day to day? We're for compliance, we're for performance reviews. We're stuck in that spot, but not seeing what we give every day as moving the organization to the future. Really, as HR, we are helping the business accomplish the goals and meet the bottom line. We're not a cost center. The work that we do should be actually in hitting the bottom line and helping the company succeed. Currently, the big talk is what's going on with all the tariffs. Is that going to impact where we're buying from? So there's another unknown. We don't know where some of these things are going to land. So how do you keep moving the organization and keeping the values going? A huge topic right now is DEI. And for a lot of us as companies, having that diversity is essential to who we are. So that value can still, how do you navigate that unknown without losing your value in your cores?
Do you know the number one mistake that HR leaders are making today? Well, we're going to tell you about that today, and we're also going to tell you how to fix it. I'm super excited for today's show because we're going to go through the core HR dilemma. But as we think about that core HR dilemma, it really applies to employees too. So we're going to talk about the common pitfalls that people are making as they think about strategically deploying themselves in their roles. And we're going to give you some real world examples. So I'm super excited to dive into this today with my guest. And we'll be talking to you about strategic thinking, what that looks like if you are in the world of HR. But if you are in the world of HR, you're probably an employee or an executive leader somewhere else too. My guest today is Nadine. We're going to dive into the book. Nadine, thank you. Welcome for coming. She is an HR executive leader. She is also a leadership development expert, and she's author of this brand new book, Think, Speak, Act, Strategically Today. And there's a key tagline here, a leadership story for human resources professionals. And there's the name. I didn't want to get this wrong. So Nadine Stead Ontiveros. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct.
Nadine, welcome. How are you? Let's dive straight in. Tell us how you are, and then why did you write this book? I think this will be a crucial place to start.
Great. Hi, James. Good to see you today. And thank you for inviting me to the show. I wrote this book as I journeyed along with other HR professionals and realized with listening to all the stories that there were a lot of folks really struggling what it meant to be strategic. And I would go to conferences and we'd see these big strategic plans, but it wasn't giving what I felt like us as human resource professionals actually need to live every day. And so I had run into some professionals that had been asked to be strategic, didn't know what it meant. And then other professionals that had challenges like their teams needing to shrink, or other professionals that came to an organization that didn't have any strategy and they were trying to find their way. So I put all these things together and really wanted to give somebody the tools on how can I actually be strategic. Instead of thinking as being strategic as a piece of paper with a plan, want it to be how we think, how we be, how we act. So that's what I started playing with, and this book is what happened from that.
Well, it is absolutely awesome. The way I'm most impressed with the construction of the book, because I want to tell everybody, and I'll hold it up again, Think, Speak, Act. This is not just a book that you kind of read and enjoy the stories and then put down. There's some structure to this, and there's some preparation that's gone into it. So I love that. And I hear what you're saying about conferences, because I used to go to conferences and hear the word philosophy all the time. And I had no idea what it meant. And I was like, what do you mean I got to create my own philosophy? And so I really struggled for a long time. And so that's what I think I'm hearing you say. So with that in mind, you're picking up the information that people are struggling. What were they struggling with? What are these HR executives, leaders, professionals struggling with? Give us some examples.
Well, I would say, I could use the first character, Louisa. She had grown up in HR, and some of us have come to the career different paths, and some have come in, say, as an admin assistant. Over your career, you've grown, and the company's grown. And I've seen a couple of places where that's happened, and all of a sudden the CEO has come up and said, you need to be more strategic. We're shifting, our company's growing, but the CEO's not sure what that means, or the professional either. And so that's one of the challenges I took on, because it seemed like it was happening a lot in smaller companies that are now coming to mid-size. And so what that shift is often you come into HR and it's so fast moving. Every day is different. There's a lot of real time situations. And as the HR teams are getting stuck in what do we do day to day? We're for compliance, we're for performance reviews. We're stuck in that spot, but not seeing what we give every day as moving the organization to the future. So making that connection that how a performance review is built should actually be aligned with the direction the company is going, more so than HR working a little bit siloed or in isolation. So that's one of the real-time events that I've seen is folks kind of struggling with how do I deal with this craziness that's coming every day? We've come through COVID, we've come through all these different things. So we're going fast, fast, fast. How do I align my HR work and my team to actually take the company where it needs to go? And that's a different skill set. And we need in small and mid-sized companies to do both. We don't have the luxury to just be strategic, just be operational. We need the ability to be able to come back and forth.
All of that resonates. And you talked about small and mid-sized companies there. And I think this is pervasive in any size of organization. As soon as you create that organization that is big enough to have an HR function, you start to see that. What do you think some of the causes are? What is causing this struggle? What is causing this disconnect between being strategic and then connecting your work to the strategic imperatives of the day?
I definitely think as a whole, some HR teams are not staffed correctly with the workload, and there isn't always a recognition of how much is coming their way and how much time things take. I'll use an example like recruiting. By the time you've gone through that whole process, there's so many hours. Whereas another executive just thinks, you've hired somebody, I was in a couple interviews, we're done. They don't understand the whole process, even investigations, developing performance review. There's so much time. And even though we have AI and a lot of ability to speed things up, that face-to-face time that needs to come in HR does take time. So I do think teams are not always adequately staffed for what's coming at them. And that's one of the things I address in the book is how do you evaluate how many staff members and doing what to meet the organization so that you can actually make that argument to an executive team. Because really as HR, we are helping the business accomplish the goals and meet the bottom line. We're not a cost center. The work that we do should be actually in hitting the bottom line and helping the company succeed. And so being able to say, you want to go here, here's the skills we need in HR, for example, maybe leadership development, because we're having different cases or EEOC claims or things. What we're doing is actually addressing the bottom line, how we work together and how we meet our goals.
Some of what you said there, I see in chapter 3. So you actually have a whole chapter devoted to this, where you say, we talked about that character, Louisa. Louisa takes the plunge to become more strategic. But I want to share, because maybe you won't, but at the end of every chapter, especially this one, which is being more strategic, you have 3 specific action points for the reader. And you call it reflections for the reader. And those 3 points are to think, and then you've got some questions. So this is why I say to you, this book it's not just a book, it's a tool. It's going to help you perform in your role, whether you're in that HR function or not. To think first, then it's going to tell you what to speak about. So you've got questions and reflections for you to think about what you say, and then what the actions are for you as well. And I want to pull that out as you told us about Louisa. You actually talked about another character in that chapter who maybe we can talk about now. Yeah, I want to learn more about Danielle. So we know Louisa had the path of becoming more strategic, and then you use Danielle as a character inside the book. Tell us about Danielle.
So Danielle was hired to support an HR executive. Something happened and the HR executive left and she assumed that role. And I've seen that happen where all of a sudden you just take on extra hats, but maybe your role has not been filled. And so she's attempting to do her work and her team's work. And this company that she works for is a much larger one, and they are buying different subsidiaries in manufacturing. And so the way of hiring and staffing and training all of these new organizations is pretty heavy on the team. And at budget time, they're like, she hears from her manager, let's look at cutting somebody from your team. And because of course, where else would you cut? I had a bit of humor there. And
The marketing people are saying, yeah, well, they come to us.
Everybody thinks they're getting picked up. And so, so what Danielle really realizes is just no way they can do what they need to do with who they have. And what these three characters in the book in the end journey together. You've got Louisa, Daniel, and then you'll meet Sam. Is she realizes that the company does have a strategic plan and they do have goals. What if I align my department with the company's strategic plan? And so in the book, you get to walk through her, how she gets her team together, looks at what direction the company's going, and then determines on her own what are the specific roles they need to meet these goals. What should their team actually look like? And so, and what I love about Danielle is I also put in some of the things we deal with in HR, and many of us are women, and she's trying to navigate herself as a career woman when her family expectations are to be something else, to be home and make a marriage. And you see a little bit of that conflict. So I try to add some real life stories that here's somebody who really is recognizing, I love this work and this is what I want to do. And so you can journey with her a little bit of that as we through the story, but she's fun to journey with because she's learning her new role and designing a team with intent to present to the executive team. I need X number of people, and here's exactly why.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper because I think whether it's individual or team alignment, that's a challenge not just for the HR executive, that's a challenge for any executive. So tell us a little bit about, because this is chapter 4, folks. So it's we're walking you through a story here about what's in the book. But team alignment is actually chapter 4, and it talks a little bit about Danielle sharing her story. What are the 2 or 3 things that you could pull out of that chapter for us that I think would be valuable for everybody learning that? How do I align my team with the organization?
I would say, number one, you need to understand where your organization's going. And sometimes HR can silo yourself and just focus on your goals and what you're meeting and not step back and say, what is actually important to the CEO, the executive team, the board, whoever are the governing voices of the organization, depending on your structure, but actually truly understanding where do they want to be in 5 years? And then look at what does that mean if we're going to add a new line of service? Does that mean we're going to impact our sales team? Do we need more sales folks? Are they a different kind of sales than we have now? So that you're starting to look at where are we going? So that means we need to hire that kind of people, that kind of skill set. Does my HR team have the capability to hire, to recruit and hire those individuals? So I would say really understanding where, when you look at the specifics, we might have a big goal. We want to have X amount of market share. Dig into what that actually means for each team on the people front. Does it mean more bodies, training? Does it mean less bodies in one area? They may be questions you may be difficult that you want to face. But when I think about really aligning your team, I'm in a current role where we have seasonal construction. So aligning my team to be able to recruit quickly a couple months a year, but we don't need a full-time recruiter all the time. So how do you structure the flow of the work that week? So those are some examples.
Yeah, and I think the book does a really good job. There's themes throughout, the role of the HR executive in the way that they attract talent, the way they reward that talent, and then the way they develop that talent. And you do a nice job, I think. It's kind of interwoven within it. And I think for the non-HR executive, this is a good kind of textbook to read to understand what's going on the other side of the fence if you're unfamiliar with it. But for the HR executive, I think that bit is you do a really masterful job of talking through those 3 things as it relates to the strategy of the company. And I'm going to talk a little bit about structure of the book as well. I've already talked about the reflections for the reader at the end of every chapter, but there's more, and we'll dive into that. I want to skip ahead a little bit and talk a little bit about, I think it's chapter 8, where you talk about navigating the unknown. And
Mm.
I love the title of this because I think every career executive, every professional that I've worked with has to navigate the unknown at some point. And you touch on some of the things that are pervasive in HR as well as outside. So tell us a little bit about what's inside that chapter and what we can expect.
No, that's great. Honestly, when we think of all the things that, COVID's the easy example. None of us predicted that would happen. Suddenly you're hit, laws are changing, you're jumping in. But that's happening in so many of our careers with AI coming up. What does that look like? A lot of times as an executive, if we're just focused on what our HR functions are, recruiting, talent management, and we're not looking at what the unknown is, we're going to be less blindsided. But what I do love, me personally, about the unknown is that's the space where the magic can happen. So we may have a goal up front. Here's where the company's going for market share, market shift. Like currently, the big talk is what's going on with all the tariffs. Is that going to impact where we're buying from? So there's another unknown. We don't know where some of these things are going to land. So how do you keep moving the organization and keeping the values going? A huge topic right now is DEI. And for a lot of us as companies, having that diversity is essential to who we are. So that value can still, how do you navigate that unknown without losing your value and your cores? So those are some of the things I think about in that space in any of our roles in the organization. I think the more we can embrace the unknown, there's the book about the black swan that we prepare for things in the past. This happened to us before, gets prepared. We don't want this to happen again. How do we stay open-minded to what we do not see coming?
One of the things that we talked about Louisa and Danielle already as a couple of individuals, another character in the book. And I want to talk about this because it brings real world experience and so it brings what you're saying alive. So let's talk about Sam, who's another character inside the book. How does what we just talked about there about navigating the unknown apply with Sam and what was going on there specifically?
Oh, and that's great. So Sam has a military background and he's come from a very structured, clear mission vision. And the organizations that he's worked for, he stepped in. The marching orders are here. Here's the vision. Here's the mission. Here's where we're going. And when he interviews, everybody speaks that language. And so in his mind, he's just entering what he's always entered. It's not long when he's in the company and he realizes there really isn't any clear mission vision. It's a startup that's suddenly growing. We all know we're working on this product, but there's not really a clear, here's where we're going, here's what we're trying to accomplish. And he's just lost. He's been asked to put a budget together. It's like, I don't even know where we're going. How do I even know? I'm the first CHRO for the startup. And I just have, for him to have that unknown is just really tricky. And so what he ends up learning to navigate is, wait, I've had a lot of experience in this mission vision. How do I start meeting with my CEO, visit with him on this, get him in the executive team? How do I find out what really matters to them and where they're all going? And then we have a united message. And so that's the story of Sam, is him building the relationships, because really everybody kind of knows what they're doing and they're excited. They're all building something. But as they're growing, there's a little more disconnect. And so the CEO is at a space where, all right, let's all get aligned. Let's all go the same direction together. And watching that journey with him to learn a new leadership skill is to actually be the creator and the facilitator. In HR, that's what's really fun, is we really get to make everybody else shine. Here's the direction. Let's get you going. And he learns how to facilitate that process.
Hey, just hopping in, I want to thank you for watching the video up until this point, and I want to let you know that you have an opportunity to speak with me one-on-one. That's right, you have a private phone call where I will deliver somewhere between $10,000 and $100,000 worth of value over the course of your lifetime. And it won't mean much. You just have to give up 30 to 45 minutes, talk a little bit about what your current situation is, and I will take you as the executive, as the business owner, on a journey to a point of desired outcome. If that sounds like something you're interested in, drop down into the show notes here and book yourself a time with me. And it's such a valuable story. And again, we've talked about HR executives who maybe don't always get the opportunity to do mission, vision, and setting budgets. You talked about creation of budgets. But my experience of working with HR executives in the work I do is very much that they are tasked with budgets and they are tasked with headcounts and they are tasked with figuring out
Mhm.
compensation planning. And there's a lot more data-driven stuff that's going on. And so it's good that Sam belongs in the right place. And the thing that stands out to me about Sam, for any other executive watching, you've got to know what you're doing about 50% of the time. But the other 50%, excuse my language, there should be a little bit of pee running down your leg to allow you to grow into that space, but also to remind you, you belong here because we don't have anybody else who could do this. You know, that you're operating at a standard where you can grow into the role. And I always make that kind of, is anybody ready for the next level? Not really. You grow into that. Is the silver medalist ready for the gold medal? Well, we don't know until the next race. And if they win the gold medal, yeah, now they're ready for gold medals, so they can get more gold medals. But typically to stretch yourself. So I love that story there. Now I want to talk about you in your own words. I want you to tell us about the book in your own words. So it's called Think, Speak, Act. And as we keep going through the book, there is the Think, Speak, Act model. Tell us about that in the, you're the author here, Nadine, in your words.
So, in my words, what I've been challenged in my life is as a leader, it matters so much who I am. Behaviors are important, but if I just take on a behavior, that's definitely part of our growth. But for me, is the essence of who I am and what I think does impact how I speak and how I act. And so I really thought through, and a lot of it was my journey because strategic thinking somewhat comes naturally to me. So I thought, how can I help those that I'm really, really struggling, but I had no words for it. And I started to really realize that if you can change how you think and put time aside to think, which is one of my principles, is really take some time to reflect. We don't do that very often. We're going 100 miles an hour, but to actually reflect on what my purpose in my role is, where the role is going, that will impact how I speak and how I act. And so for me, that's the integrity that is so important to all of us in HR is that circle of that model. So I do that as an individual. How do you think, speak, and act? And then I talk about that as your team. How do you as a team think, speak, and act? And start working on that together. If you've changed your team to start working as a strategic business partner, are they speaking that way? Or are they speaking as, I'm just here for compliance? Oh, HR is in the room, we're in trouble. Or when that happens, they're saying, oh no, we're not we're here to help you. We're here to support you and get to your goals. Are we starting, for instance, I gave a presentation this morning right before this, and I started it with the company goal. Yes, we're doing this meeting, but everything is around us all accomplishing this goal. And then I'll talk about that same model as an executive team. You're looking for the whole organization in the end to have some of that forward thinking because in a lot of ways, I think that model is based on, I have three questions in there that I ask at different levels is where are we today? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? That's some of the unknown.
Yeah.
Um, but those are the three questions that can help us inform how do we think, speak, and act.
Is there a percentage that somebody should be thinking, speaking, acting? Is it equal? Does it vary? How does it vary? What do you think about that?
I've heard some percentages like the higher you are up on the leadership chain, you should at least, I'm totally going off memory. I should have looked at that stat, but I've heard anything like an hour to 2 hours a week that you actually just take time to think. I think there's one way. Other ways, and I do recommend this in the book a little bit too, is maybe put little pockets, like a 20-minute, a 30-minute. I've been going 100 miles an hour. My schedule shifted. This emergency happened. Can I take 30 minutes just to remember again, what are the strategic projects we're working on? Where are we at? Anytime you can take a couple of minutes, and I like to use that idea of a hawk, you just kind of need to pull ourselves out of all the things that are and the pressures and the deadlines today. Look at the big picture. So if doing that once a day for half an hour or 20 minutes helps you, or even a 5-minute walk around the property, just pull yourself out for a minute, that helps you with that practice. Because really, you think about a lot of times in the day, we're going up and down. And the more we can develop intentionally that skill, and then for me personally, I just treasure my Saturday mornings. I need to reflect. And so I'll write on how did I do this week? What are the leadership times I did great? What did I not do so well and I'm cringing about? When did I get too stuck in the weeds and not make that decision from a big picture point of view? So those are some of the things. It's hard for me to put a time, but I would really decide how much you want this and then determine what's reasonable for me in my role and who I am to make this part of my life, not just an add-on.
It is, yeah, and yeah, part of my life. That's right. 90,000 hours of work in 700,000 hours of life. It's a
Yeah,
decent amount. 12, 13% of your
yeah.
life is going to be doing this. So yeah, I love that you added that at the end. That's pretty cool. So let's talk about your views on my experience of HR leadership. I've interviewed CHROs on this channel before. I've spoken to HR executives as prospects, as clients, and worked with them for years. Some of them. And the theme that comes up for me is chaos and overwhelm. So you talked a little bit about understaffing. How else might those executives in that HR position, and we're not just talking to HR executives, how might they handle that chaos and overwhelm that goes on in the workplace?
I think for me, that ability to take time to reflect in the chaos is enormous. Because I mean, honestly, any executive and many of our roles across the nation are understaffed and doing 100 miles an hour. And, and if you can't, like I go back to that, pulling yourself out of it and think about the big picture. So you probably need to do a little bit of work so that when you pull yourself out, you know what you're going to. So for me right now, I have four strategic objectives I'm working on in the organization I'm in. And so if I, in the chaos, I'll take a moment to go back to those because those are my grounding, because those are the things that are going to have the biggest impact while I'm dealing with this executive needs this, the CEO needs this, legal needs this. We really have to learn to pace ourselves because we will never, I've had to come to terms with, we will never have a day where we got it all done, or a week or a month. And so that constantly deciding I'll talk to my team about a golden thread. We have a golden thread. This is our general direction that we want to keep coming back to because we're going to get pulled away. It's going to happen. It's just impossible not to. We're going to feel like we don't know what we're going. Here's the golden thread we come back to. Here's our top priorities, at least for this week, for them specifically. They may have, key hires out of the 20. You've got to be able to prioritize something because you won't get everything done. So that ability to put things in order. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to come back to.
And so I want people to learn a little bit about you in this conversation as well. So how does that, what you just told us, marry to who you are as the individual? So some people think about, I've got my work face and I've got my personal face, but some people have done a really good job of marrying that. Tell us a little bit about personally what drives you, what you get excited about in this HR arena. What are the things that would allow somebody to connect to you pretty quickly? Just tell us something personally about your drive, your energy, and your enthusiasm for this.
So many things. My brain goes 100 directions at once. But I mean, for me, my life mission is to make a difference in the world, which sounds so dramatic, but I really do want to do that. And I've learned to do that. I used to think it was something big. Now I realize it's, one thing at a time, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. And I think business is a wonderful place to make a difference in the world. I love business. I love the game of it. I love winning. I love the challenge, the unexpected, and I love people. So I'll often say I'm 100% for the business and 100% for the people. And I know the math doesn't work, but it's like a marriage. If you both give 50%, you're not going to have a great marriage. You've got to be 100% both. And so for me, I love that space of competition and the role people play. So that's really important to me. I love to see people grow. And my favorite thing is when you've had conversations and you've helped people see something they didn't know about themselves or help them enlarge their dream a little, recognize, oh, I could make that step. I
Yeah.
maybe do have that. Because we often are harsh on ourselves, our lenses aren't accurate, and we seldom get positive feedback of what do you actually bring to the room. So those are things that keep me alive every day is I love to get things done that are impossible. I love to get everybody together to do it together and get all those folks, all those perspectives together. I love these diverse, everybody's not agreeing and we bring ourselves together. And I think that's a little bit about me. And personally, you talked about the overwhelm. I need to be outdoors. I need adventure. I four-wheel Jeep drive because I need to take some risks. Um, that's what keeps me alive. And I need to work out. That's a huge part of overwhelm and stress for me. My CrossFit family is a huge support for me.
Mm.
Going to see them every day and getting everything out of my body. So I deal with it with reflection, reading, family. I'm so lucky. I have three little grandbabies and three kids. So those are things that motivate me. And I personally am excited because I hope to model for my granddaughters what it is to be a leader and a business leader. I'm excited about that. And the book is part of that, is to help pave the way for folks coming on behind me. I'm an immigrant, grew up in Zimbabwe, and immigrated in my late teens, right before I turned 18. And so I have lived through all kinds of things, and I'm very grateful for where I'm at and where we're going. So there's a little bit about me.
Here's my perspective. Everyone's going to agree with me on this. You got great energy. You are the leader. You are the role model for those people following your life, but not just the people who are in your family or your close knit friendship group. It's the people beyond that you have discipline and willingness to do this. And I'll hold the book up again because we're going to return to it in a second. It's this Think, Speak, Act, everybody. We're going to put the link in below straight to where you can buy this in some good bookstores, probably some not so good bookstores too, but they'll still sell it. So you can get the book. But that to me is the leadership that you are now writing, and you've left that legacy, and so people will be able to leverage that. And so in the book, there's a great example of how you've brought all of your personality together, as well as your experience, deep expertise in this field, by the way. You talk about structuring the experience, and there's a lot of structure in there around how to create a meeting plan, how to create a 1 year annual plan, how to create a strategic plan, which actually is maybe 3 years or a big strategic plan. So tell us a little bit about that, because it's towards the end, and then I'm going to go to the poetry at the end, because chapter 12 has a poetic title. We'll talk about that in a second. But tell us a little bit about those plans and the structures and why you felt that was so important to put them in there, even to the point you showed people what was on every slide. And it's awesome. So tell us about that.
Well, that is fun because I did I thought it would be such a fun idea to actually walk through the journey, and I didn't know if it was going to work. Where you actually go with Danielle and you're part of her presentation and you do see what's on her slide. And what really mattered to me is what I wanted to show people is that everybody can be strategic. It is a thinking, speaking, acting, but here's the tools. This is what it looks like to actually develop a plan. Here's a vision statement. And so I don't want to go into all the details because it'll bore you. Well, no, it won't bore you. You'll love it. But I wanted to show how to do it so that if somebody reads it, they could easily model it with their own company and just adjust it here and there. I really wanted HR professionals to see, here's the output. You can run a team meeting. You can build a plan. It's not complicated to do. Here's a model, and there's two different strategic plans. So you can actually see there's different ways to do it. I really wanted to see, because it is about thinking, speaking, giving a presentation, and then the action is having the plan written. It's also going to hold you accountable, which I don't really address in the book. Maybe that'll be the next book. But you're going to say, here's what I'm going to do. And then you need to do it. So action is going to matter. And I really wanted to create something that I felt like when you hear about strategic conversations, it sounds ethereal and out there. I wanted it tangible. You can put your hands on. I'm strategic because I have this plan. These are our priorities. This is how I do it. And so that really was important to me, that you have actual tools that you can jump in, model them, or bounce from.
Well, you've done a magical job. It really comes out off the page to me. It was just the amount of guidebook this is to actually take you by the hand and walk you through some of the processes. Congratulations. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about chapter 12. It's poetically titled "Strategically Ever After," and you have this wonderful quote on there from one of my favorite sports people in the world. I'm a big believer in champions, and I actually like it when champions are booed because if you're a champion and you're booed, it actually means someone has an opinion. You're so good that you forced other people to have an opinion. It makes me think about Taylor Swift at the Super Bowl. Completely different story, but why are they booing? This is like this incredible, powerful woman, and she's getting booed. It doesn't make any sense. But you do say this. Novak says, "I think luck falls on not just the brave, but also the ones who believe they belong there." And there's a theme of this throughout the book that you talked about. We've talked about Sam and Danielle, and that shows me that you're very much interested in these individuals and you believe they belong there. Talk a little bit about why that quote and strategically ever after. Well, tell us about that chapter.
So I did strategically ever after because I am imaginative and creative and love, I just thought it would be really fun in that it's somewhat visionary and fairy tale-ish, but possible. And so that's why I use that title because I wanted to add what sometimes when we daydream in that space, we allow ourselves to be more creative. And I wanted to give us that space because in the end, working with people, it's never black and white and sure. You're always doing the best you can because we're pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to create some of that. The comment on belong there, I would say it's been a life journey for me personally, partly being an immigrant and I went to high school, I think 5 high schools in 3 different countries. Belonging was something that I've struggled with. And then even in my own career, I'm a late bloomer. Took time out to be with my kids. And it was hard to get back into the workforce after that, much harder than I anticipated. And so that trying to jump in and sell yourself and then grow fast, challenge that belonging and realize how much it is about how it goes back to my thinking. If I think I belong somewhere, I'm going to speak and act differently in that space. And really, if we've been hired for that role and we're at the table, we're there. So we may as well belong. And so that I realized that had actually limited some of my decision making and growth when I didn't just rest in the space. I'm here. I belong. Here's the skill set and I'm going to make the difference here. So that's why that quote really matters to me is it's easier for me to be brave and risk taking just by nature. But the belonging part is a little more vulnerable. And so I would say, I don't know if I'm putting to words as deeply as I feel that, but that chapter it has the playfulness and the depth to me of implies a little bit of good explanation of me
Yeah.
that I wanted to paint.
I think it continues the theme of celebrating the book with you today, and I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to connect with you and meet with you. So let's go there next. And then I do have maybe one more question for you, just based on some of the things you're saying in that last section. But yeah, thank you. I want to celebrate the book with you today. So thank you very much for sharing the book with us and the opportunity to put this out on the channel, but also to share it in digital platforms so other people get to see it. Where can they find you? What's the best place to come and knock on your door and speak with you?
Yeah, probably the easiest is LinkedIn. If you like LinkedIn, please look Nadine Stead Ontiveros on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Another place would be if you would rather not go that route, if you want to go by email, it's the same Nadine Stead Ontiveros at gmail.com. And I would love to connect. I mean, that's what's so much fun about life is journeying. I'd love thoughts and ideas. So I would be so grateful if you reached out in either of those places.
Yeah, and I would love people who would love you to speak about the book at any HR conference. So if you're running an HR conference and you're looking for speakers, then we've just found you one, and I recommend that
Yeah.
you contact Nadine to do that. So let's finish on this last thing, and then we'll let everybody go about their business and get back to the chaos and overwhelm or whatever it is. That hopefully we've helped some of you people today with some pretty neat and imaginative, creative ideas. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration. Who are the role models and people you admire that maybe were a catalyst for making sure that this got on the shelves? What did that look like for you?
Mm.
Who are those people?
Well, I do dedicate the book to my husband. So I can't not bring him up because he was the one who when we met, I didn't really realize my own dreams. And I put in there that he saw me when I was invisible. He has believed in me all along, and that would not happen without him. I just have to say that. Other folks, I love to read, and you've got me off guard. But I guess people that I think about in my life, there are two women, Holly and Gail in Durango, Colorado. They were both veterans and they're both in their 70s. Listening to them and their stories and their growth in the military through the years has been so inspiring to me. So anytime I've seen a woman put up with what they had to, their skirts and their gloves and the stories they tell and how they manage through life. Those two women are a huge voice in my life, and I don't live close to them anymore, but we do reach out once in a while. But they're always close to my heart. Gail has great humor, makes us laugh. Holly is the grounded. Here's the process. If you're going to be upset, you have 10 minutes, and that's it. So, but they've both been a really good part of my life and have encouraged me to think I could do this. So that's who comes to me. But I read all the time. I would say I feel like most people are my heroes in one way or another. I have a hard time always choosing one because I feel like anybody I meet has something to show me that I can learn from.
I'm a big believer in, one wouldn't make sense, would it? Because you want want to be inspired by people for different strengths and capabilities. And
yes,
I always think, maybe professionally that's 8 to 12 people, and then personally it's another 8 to 12 people. And you've got another 4 to 12 people who help you grow because they challenge you. And here's my challenge to you. When's the next book? That's my challenge today. So that's the thing for you to be thinking about. I've planted the seed now, so you can't get away with it. You got to write the next book. So let's wrap this up this way. And I do this purposely at the end because I really want people to listen to you before I ask this. For those people who don't want to buy this book, what are the 3 things that they need to know? Are the 3 most important things that are inside this book that would be life-changing as for their professional life? Yeah, what would that look like?
I would say if you feel like you're stuck in operational duties or in your career, you haven't been promoted or you've been looked over and you're not sure, I would say if you could think about those questions, where am I today? Where do I want to go? And then make a plan on how to get there. And so I would think that is really important. There are times people are not being promoted or they're not growing. It's because they aren't necessarily forward thinking, but nobody can express it to them. So try to dig into some of those to ask those questions for yourself and then for your team. How does your team think? Do they know where they're going? Do you guys have a plan to get there? And then as an organization, it's the same thing. Where are you today? Where do you want to go? And how do you want to get there? And so I would say if you don't want to read the book, those 3 questions could be really, really helpful. And then I would really encourage you to have a friend talk to or reflect yourself journal to consider your thinking. How do I think about my work, my future, my teams, my organization? And then start thinking about how does that show in my words and in my actions? Because often we might recognize our thinking in what we said and how we acted instead of our thinking. And that's just a growth thing for all of us to constantly think about is our thinking is the root of everything we do, but we don't often take a lot of time to evaluate how we think. So that's what I would leave with you.
Loads of things in there to wrap up with. A lot of it was about planning and thinking and planning. But, where do you want to go? There's a summary here. Why and when do you want to go there? And how are you going to get there? I think that's a wonderful way for us to wrap up today. Nadine, I can say nothing but thanks to you. I appreciate sharing your book with us today. And I'm super excited to see what comes next for you, as well as hearing about all those people who invite you to their conference so you can stand on their stage. We'll say goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed that video with Nadine and a little interview about her book, Think, Speak, Act, and you would like to learn more inside our channel, I encourage you to go to this video right now, where you'll learn more about how to maximize your potential in your career. I'll see you inside.